am here to do the devil's work.
Every October, I do a yearly watch of the Halloween movie series, but as most of you know, this franchise has a ridiculous amount of alternate timelines. Way more than any reasonable amount for a story about a guy that wears a white mask and stabs people. But when I do my Halloween rewatch, I usually just watch from the original up until H2O, and then I stop there, because to me, H2O is the perfect ending and a solid conclusion. But technically speaking, H2O is not part of the same timeline as Halloween 1 through 6. Also, 3 is out there somewhere too, but we're not going to worry about that. Good movie though. In my personal little headcanon, I just try to shoehorn Halloween H2O into the original timeline because it can still kind of fit. The only huge leap of logic you have to make is believing that Lorie Strode would, for some reason, leave her daughter behind in Haddonfield after faking her death. Given how protective she is of John in H2O, I think that's unlikely, but I try not to think about it. So yeah, my personal Halloween canon is 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and H2O. Even though I know that's not a technical timeline. However, at the end of the year 2000, after the release of H2O, and still before the release of Halloween Resurrection, the movie that shat on everything that H2O did and also added in a kung fu kicking Busta Rhymes. Right before that came a 3-issue comic series from Chaos Comics telling us a short yet interesting story that actually attempts to link Halloween 6 to Halloween H2O. Well, sort of. See, Halloween 6 is where it went off the rails, trying too hard to explain Michael Myers and give him this whole lore and backstory and the cult storyline that never really made a ton of sense to begin with. And then H2O came along and just ignored all of that. But this short comic book series picks up where Halloween 6 left off, and then it branches and overlaps with Halloween H2O to a degree. So in a way, you can kind of consider this to be an alternate sequel to Halloween H2O instead of Halloween Resurrection. This is an alternate version of what Halloween 8 could have looked like if they went forward with the story idea. The first issue is mostly just a flashback. We see Tommy Doyle, who is the main character of Halloween 6, though here in the comic, he doesn't exactly look anything like Paul Rudd did. Maybe they couldn't get the likeness rights, I don't know. Also, it doesn't explain where any of the other characters are, including Jamie's baby, which you would imagine Michael would be after in some capacity. But none of the characters are here other than Tommy Doyle himself. He's acquiring as much of Dr. Loomis's research as he can as he's beginning to write a book on Michael Myers and his experiences. When he comes across Loomis's private journal, he gets a lot more information that he never knew, and this was my favorite part of all 3 issues. We get to see all of these snippets of Loomis's time with Michael at the asylum, Michael as a child, and how Loomis's intrigue and sympathy soon became obsession and terror. And just like traditionally, Michael never speaks here, but he does interact with other kids, and periodically, each of these kids ends up dying in a mysterious way. One ends up with a crayon stabbed in his eye. Another one is severely burned when temperatures of the showers turned up way too high. And then for some godforsaken reason, they attempt to have a Halloween party with all these kids, where a girl is killed quickly as soon as the lights go out, drowned in a bobbing for apples tub. Loomis is attempting to convince everybody that it's Michael doing all of the killing, but all of them can more or less be explained by accident, so nobody quite believes him, continuously making Loomis feel more crazy and act more manic. Meanwhile, Michael continues to be silent the entire time and never answers any questions when spoken to. I've thought a lot about what they could do if and when they ever decide to bring Halloween back as a movie series, because you know eventually it will be. And I've honestly always wanted to see a movie where Loomis is the main character. And if they ever did that, there's a lot in this comic they could draw inspiration from if they wanted to. For example, we see that Loomis was actually in love with another doctor. And it's such a unique avenue to go down because throughout the movies, we don't really know much of anything about Loomis's personal life. He's just so consumed with the motivation of stopping Michael Myers, as if all he has left is just the thought of stopping this ultimate evil. Here we get to see that he once did try living a normal life outside of his work, but of course, it's cut short. Michael pushes Dr. Hill off the top of the building, making it seem like she jumped to her death. ruining Loomis's life even further. Loomis knows the truth, and he vows to try to keep Michael locked up forever, and the worst part is, he can't prove any of this to anyone because, again, they all look like accidents, but Loomis knows the truth. I really like this idea. And I know they did a lot of scenes of Michael and Loomis in the Rob Zombie remake, and those were my favorite scenes of that movie too. But I would love to see a version of the events of the original Halloween, or at least more similar to it, from Dr. Loomis's perspective, spending a lot more time at the asylum. There's some great story potential here, and I think this comic really capitalizes on it. The only problem is, this is only the first issue. Because then we cut back to present time, and Michael attacks Tommy Doyle. Tommy is ready this time, though. He shoots the shit out of Michael, and then burns his face up. Then he makes Michael fall out a window. Damn, Tommy's not fucking around anymore. But Michael pulls the old disappearing act after falling off the building, and we come to the end of the first issue. In the second issue, that's where things start to get weird. You know that one kid that briefly bumps into Michael Myers outside of the school in the first movie, one of the bullies of Tommy Doyle? I'm sure the one burning question that you've always had was, whatever happened to that kid? Well, you've probably never thought that. But if for some reason you did, he's here as an adult with his life falling apart and totally burnt out. He also looks like he's probably 20 years older than he's actually supposed to be, but he's still sitting here thinking about Michael Myers all these years later. I do kind of like the idea, though, that the real curse of Michael Myers is that everybody that encounters him and manages to live to tell the tale seems to just spiral into their own form of insanity over time. Loomis, Tommy Doyle, even this random kid, and the ending of this comic that we'll get to. Everybody starts to go more and more manic and lose their minds after dealing with Michael Myers. It even affects Sheriff Brackett, who, in this comic, they really mess with. He ends up killing Richie by accidentally shooting him when they both ended up at the Myers house. And like any good, respectable police officer, he then decides to take Richie's body out to the middle of nowhere and bury him so that nobody finds out. But somebody does find out, and it's Tommy Doyle confronting Brackett. And here, Brackett begins to dump lore and exposition that I guess he uncovered post-Halloween 2, because back then he didn't seem to know much about Michael Myers at all. Here he says the reason he became a cop was because of Judith Myers' murder, and also that he used to sleep with Judith Myers. And he also mentions that everyone else slept with her too, so they turned Judith into a hoe for whatever reason. He talks about how Michael's curse dates back thousands of years from a group of druids and to the early days of Haddonfield, where the entire bloodline was said to be affected. The men in the bloodline would carry the seed of evil, and the women would have nightmarish visions and dreams. By burning sacrifices, a few generations were spared, but not when Michael was born. The evil had returned. And I really don't like the over-explanation of Michael, and none of this really explains how it's tied into him killing his family, but the part I do like is that they mention Michael was a stillborn at first. It was then several minutes after he came out of the womb that he suddenly came to life. And I think there is something really eerie about that. Like, it truly was an empty human vessel of a body that was then inhabited by evil. If that was the only explanation to Michael without all the cult ritual stuff, I'd be totally on board with it. And maybe he didn't kill Judith until he was 6 years old because that's how long it took for the evil to truly manifest and take full control. What's left of the cult from part 6 shows up, including the old lady from that movie leading the charge. I guess she's gotten more recruits over the last few years. They capture Tommy and Brackett in order to sacrifice them, but then Michael shows up and just kills all of them again, or most of them. He even kills Brackett this time. Everything is pinned on Tommy, though, and he's blamed for the murders and then sentenced to Smith's Grove Sanitarium. And if all that wasn't weird enough, the third issue really takes the cake. Tommy is trapped at the asylum, now with a shaved head, and Dr. Wynn is still there, but wasn't he killed off in part 6? I mean, I guess it's not really on screen, so if you don't see it on screen, whatever. Or maybe this is considering the producer's cut canon, which is the even worse version of that movie. But whatever the case, Dr. Wynn is here, and that does explain the cult still being around. But despite the efforts to try to kill Tommy while he's in here and make it look like an accident, Tommy does manage to escape. Meanwhile, we finally get the connection to H2O with Lindsay Wallace, the other kid that Lorie was babysitting in the original. She's grown up now and doing some research on Lorie, and because of that, we hear some news reports of the events that happened in H2O and how Michael attacked the school that she was working at, and she was under the alias of Carrie Tate. This is before the retcon ending, so for all intents and purposes, we're still going with the assumption that she did decapitate Michael Myers at the end. Tommy meets up with Lindsay, reuniting once again, but it's not long before they're attacked by Michael. A confrontation ensues and Tommy is stabbed, but not before they manage to rip the mask off of Michael, revealing the shocking twist that this isn't Michael Myers. This is actually Lorie Strode, who, for some reason, has the same body shape, size, and build as Michael. Yeah, this is a really dumb twist. After all that she went through in H2O of overcoming the threat of Michael, you're telling me that suddenly now her sanity is just going to break to the point where she becomes Michael Myers, claiming that she couldn't cope without the existence of Michael being a part of her life, and so she became Michael, so the murders would continue. Yeah, they try to go for a psycho-ish ending here. No matter how you want to continue Halloween H2O, it just sucks. You either have the completely retcon ending of Halloween Resurrection, or you have the ending that keeps Michael dead, but does it at the expense of Lorie. I never really understood the obsession of the idea of passing the mantle to another horror killer. All of the Friday the 13th Part 5s and Halloween Ends of the world. It's strange to me that that's even an accepted idea that people would want. Michael Myers isn't a mantle, it's a character. But if I really did have to choose, I may still go with the comic ending, just because, as silly and goofy as it is, it's still better than the Halloween Resurrection reality TV show angle. And it also does kind of mimic the ending of Halloween 4 in a way, which was also an idea they never followed up on. Anyways, it ends with Lorie Strode in the asylum and a dismissal of the cult history, I guess trying to make it a little bit more ambiguous now, as if the real curse is just everybody is a little bit crazy. Regardless, it is a fun alternative to the Halloween H2O follow-up, and a look at what could have been made instead of what we did get. To me, the highlight is absolutely the first issue with the Loomis backstory. I want that made into a movie. The cult angle never really worked well for me, and explaining Michael Myers isn't necessary. He's evil. That's all I really need to know. And I think the mystery of Michael is what makes it a little bit more compelling. There are some characters that you want explanations of. For example, the backstories of Jason and Freddy play a lot into their character, and I think it makes sense. But for a character like Michael Myers, it feels like the less you know, the better. But if you did want to consider this comic to be another canon, well, there's another timeline for you to add to the already nonstop increasing number of them. And since Jamie Lee Curtis only wanted to be in one scene of Halloween 8 anyways, if they made this version, she still could have done it. If you've ever read this comic series, let me know what you think about it down below. Or if you ever did want to connect Halloween 6 to Halloween H2O, how would you do it? I think the biggest thing to explain is just why Lorie would leave her daughter behind, but if you could come up with some kind of explanation for that, you could probably make the movies fit a lot better than they seem to on the surface. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this comic review. I appreciate it. Give the video a like and comment. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have Patreon channel memberships and all the social media links where you can follow me down below. Other than that, guys, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.